will daylight come includes an illustration of how sin enslaves but forgiveness frees. A little boy visiting his grandparents was given his first slingshot. He practiced in the woods but could never hit his target. He went back to Grandma's backyard where he spied one of her pet ducks. On an impulse, he took aim and let it fly. The stone hit, and the duck fell dead. The boy panicked. Desperately, he hid the dead duck in the woodpile, only to look up and see his sister, Sally, watching. She had seen it all, but she said nothing. After lunch that day, Grandma said, "Hey, Sally, why don't you help me do the dishes?" But Sally said, "Well, Johnny told me that he really wanted to help in the kitchen today, Grandma. Didn't you, Johnny?" And then whispered to him, "Remember the duck, Johnny." So Johnny did the dishes. Later, Grandma asked if the children wanted to go fishing. Grandma said, "I'm sorry, but I need Sally to help make supper." Sally smiled and said, "Oh, that's all taken care of. Johnny said he wanted to do it." Again, she whispered, "Remember the duck." Johnny stayed and Sally went fishing. After several days of Johnny doing both his chores and Sally's, finally he couldn't take it any longer. He went to Grandma and confessed that he had killed the duck. "I know, Johnny," she said, giving him a hug. "I was standing at the window and saw the whole thing. Because I love you, I forgave you. I was wondering how long you would let Sally make a slave of you." You know, it's a funny story of how sin enslaves us and condemns us, holds us down. Guilt just riddles us. But yet forgiveness brings freedom. And this morning we have this amazing account of Jesus in dealing with a woman caught in the very act of adultery. And it speaks so much to the truth of who God is, what religious people are typically like, and the heart of God toward people. So just to rewind a little bit, last week, Jesus is talking, it's the Feast of Tabernacles, and he's saying to them, "Listen, did not Moses give you the law, yet none of you keep the law? Why are you trying to kill me?" So he accuses these religious people of not keeping the law. See, it doesn't dawn on these religious people that keeping the law meant, I'll look inside me. Okay? To religious people, keeping the law means, I'm going to look at all of you people. Right? I'm going to focus on everybody else. And I'm going to be the sin police and make sure everybody else is doing their job. So then he tells them, stop judging to outward appearances. Rather judge according to righteous judgment. See, the whole idea of the law was to get every single individual to recognize they needed a Messiah. But what happens with religious people? Well, what we do is we get our lives kind of in line and we stay in these moral boundaries so that we feel good about ourselves. And we don't color outside the lines. And so religion only really works for high-functioning people. And so immediately then, because we stay inside the box, we now look down at everybody else who doesn't. And so here these Pharisees, these religious people, they hate Jesus. Because in their eyes, he broke the law. He healed a man on the Sabbath. So they want to kill him. Just go figure. He heals a man on the Sabbath. So religious people respond by, let's kill him. I mean, can you figure that out? It's a real head scratcher, the propensity that religious people have. So, Jesus lectures them, and he's trying to get them to realize the law was given so you look inside yourself and you stop looking at everybody else. Okay? Well, Jesus, as we looked last week, had just made this great announcement at this big festival, and people are starting to follow Jesus. Well, these religious folks get upset. Then the officers, okay, so what happens is the religious people had their policemen in the temple, and they told them, go arrest Jesus. So they returned to the religious people, who said to them, where is he? Why didn't you bring him back with you? And the police replied, no one ever spoke like this man. Okay, so you got to figure it. There's Jesus, teaching in the temple. The higher-ups send these other guys to do their dirty work. They go to arrest him. They get in there, and they have their whatever, they have swords and spears or whatever, and they go to arrest Jesus, but they hear him talk. And the power of his teaching is so great. They're paralyzed. And they're saying, we've never heard anyone teach like this. And they can't even arrest him. Okay? I mean, you look at it's wonderful irony. So then the religious people, okay, the pastors, the elders, the priests, respond. You haven't been deceived too, have you? None of the rulers of the Pharisees have believed him. Have they? But this rabble, these people who do not know the law, are accursed. Now, the unbelievable irony here is these religious people are saying the folks following Jesus are under a curse. And they have no idea that, no, they weren't under the curse for not believing. So here's the drama that leads up to the text that we're going to look at this morning. What these religious people should have known is what Moses said is that the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you. From your own countrymen, you shall listen to him. Now we find out, we're introduced again to Nicodemus. Remember we talked the other week, Nick at night, he was ashamed to publicly say that he was following Jesus, who had gone to Jesus before, and who was one of the rulers, said, hey, our law doesn't condemn a man unless it first hears from him and learns what he is doing, does it? They replied, you aren't from Galilee too, are you? Investigate carefully and you will see that no prophet comes from Galilee. Well, they didn't even know the Bible. Jonah came from Galilee. Nahum came from Galilee. And so here you see these religious people so angry and upset that their power and their control is weakened because of this man Jesus. So, it concludes with, and everyone went to his own house or place of residence. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles was where everybody came to Jerusalem, and if you didn't live in Jerusalem, you would put up a tent, or kind of a shack, or a lean-to, and that's where you would sleep for these 7 days. And the feast has just ended. Everybody goes in, and they're sleeping in their tent, or they're in their home. But Jesus instead goes to the Mount of Olives. Now, early in the morning, this word morning here means at dawn. At dawn, he comes into the temple, and he's going to be in the court of the women, is where we're going to see he's in the temple. And all these people come to hear him at dawn. He sits down like a rabbi would, and he starts teaching. Now remember what he'd been teaching about. He had just said the day before, and everyone's hearing, listen, if you're thirsty, if you're hungry, if you can't scratch the itch deep enough in your life, come and believe in me. I'll give you everlasting life, and it will satisfy your soul. Okay? So he had just said this. So that's the backdrop. Okay? Then, the scribes and Pharisees, these are the religious attorneys and lawyers and police, brought to him a woman caught in adultery. There's teaching. It's going to go on, and they emphasize it. Caught in the very act of adultery. She's probably naked. She's drug in before Jesus. And here we have this situation. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery." In the very act, we caught her. Okay? Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? They said, "Testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him." Now, so here's, you got to get the scene. See, here's this woman. Okay? Why was she committing adultery? Does anybody wake up one day and say, "You know what? I want to ruin my life today. I'm going to go commit adultery"? Does anyone do that? Not usually. Obviously, this woman was hungry and thirsty and broke God's law because she didn't have that relationship with Jesus that satisfied the thirst in her soul. She didn't believe Jesus taught the morning before or the afternoon before. Maybe she didn't understand it. And, you know, everybody, they're kind of traveling, and so they're sleeping in tents. And so you can imagine maybe they're, you know, and this was kind of a party, a festival. Maybe drinking was involved, who knows what. And at dawn, she's caught in the tent of another man. And these men grab her, caught in the very act, drag her in front of Jesus, in front of all the people that he's teaching, in the unbelievable shame this woman is experiencing. And Jesus understands all of this. Okay? These religious men, on the other hand, they're trying to trap Jesus. Jesus said, "You need to follow the law." And so they're saying, "Okay, well, Jesus, how are you going to follow the law? Because the law says stone her." So if Jesus said stone her, then guess what? He would have gotten in trouble from the Romans. See, the Romans were the only ones who could exercise capital punishment. The Jewish people couldn't exercise capital punishment. That's why the Jewish people had to get Pilate to crucify Jesus, remember? So, if Jesus said stone her, which is what the law said to do, then Jesus would get arrested by the Romans and they could kill him. On the other hand, if Jesus said, "Hey, just let her go, not a big deal," they could point to him and say, "He has broken the law of Moses. We've caught him." I mean, this is like the most brilliant trap you can imagine. Jesus has been the friend of sinners. He hangs out with the drunks. He hangs out with the prostitutes, the sinners. All those people, they love Jesus. And so they're like, "Hey, we finally got Jesus on the horns of a dilemma. What is he going to do? Because we've got him trapped. Either we're going to get him killed by the Romans, or we're going to show everybody he doesn't follow the Bible." And so these religious people are just so excited. See, one of the things about religious people is without Jesus, we can do some of the most darndest, horrific, awful things to people. Now, the law said, if somebody's caught in adultery, you got to bring both of them. This shows the unbelievable chauvinistic attitude these religious people had toward women. Where's the man? According to the law, if they're going to follow the law, you had to bring both of those people in. And the law said that whoever was the witness, who saw it, and who wasn't guilty of this sin, had to throw the first stone. So, here you see the mindset of these religious people. They're willing to get a woman executed just to advance their agenda. Isn't that terrible? So, they're trying to test her. But you have to see, you gotta love Jesus, okay? This is why we worship him. So there he is. Now if I were in that situation, I'd be sweating, "Oh my goodness, they got me. What am I gonna do?" And you don't have time to Google it, right? So there you are. Now Jesus, like he's God. You can imagine. There he is, And the whole crowd is watching. What's he going to do? And Jesus, he just kind of bends down. And he starts writing in the dirt. You can imagine the religious people are like, what's he doing? What is going on? We have. So with his finger, he's writing. Now, these religious people would have recognized the only time in the Bible when the finger of God was used to write was in giving the Ten Commandments. God says, and when he was made an end of speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. So Moses gets the 10 Commandments, and he comes down the mountain, and what does he find? He finds most of Israel worshiping the golden calf and involved in adultery and fornication, sexual sin. Okay? This gets really good. The other thing is the law, and maybe Jesus was writing this verse. This is an interesting verse from Exodus. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. So if you were trying to execute somebody and you were a malicious witness, guess what? The punishment for that was for you to be stoned. Okay? So maybe Jesus was writing this verse. We don't know. But the point is, Jesus is just showing these religious people who want this woman stoned are in bad, bad trouble. So, they didn't get it yet. They continued. They pestered him. So he gets up after writing on the ground, and he says to them, and you can imagine, he's just kind of off the, he's not shouting. He's not pointing his finger. He's just saying, okay, all right, well let's do this. Probably looks down off to the side. He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. Now what this means, this idea, he who is without sin among you, this specifically, the nuance of this, is he who is without sexual sin, throw the stone. So now, I mean, do you see the brilliance of Jesus? Okay? I remember in seminary, I had a professor, Howard Hendricks, and he was probably about 80 years old when I had him in class, and he had taught over 50 years, thousands of students across the world, every Sunday, are in churches preaching the gospel because of Howard Hendricks. Unbelievably godly man. When I was in my freshman year there in graduate school, in a mixed class, a student, a very brave student, raised his hand and said, "Prof, how old do you have to be till you stop struggling with lust?" And he just looked and he said, now he was about 80. He's like, "I'll let you know." The point is if people understood the purpose of the law, would they have any time to try to drag this woman and condemn her? No. But what do religious people do? Religious people use right and wrong in the law to what? Point the finger at everybody else. And Jesus is trying to get them to realize, stop pointing the finger at everybody else and look in your own. So, he says this, and again, he stoops down and he starts writing on the ground again. So, the second time that God writes on the ground is Moses breaks the 10 Commandments after their sexual sin, goes back up for 40 days and 40 nights, and the Lord wrote again the terms of the covenant on the 10 Commandments. And so the point is, the 2 times that God wrote with his finger, in between it was the sexual sin of the people that they didn't repent. And so what Jesus is doing by writing, and this is brilliant, writing on the ground twice, is he's indicting all these Jewish leaders and saying, you know what? You're breaking the law over sexual sin just like the Israelites did, just like the last time I wrote with my finger. Now this now has an effect on these people. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one. And you can imagine here, thud, 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 all these stones are dropping, right? Beginning with the oldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. So it's an unbelievable way. Jesus pointed out, you're trying to kill me. You don't mind trying to kill this woman in the process. And you're so full of self-righteousness and judgment on other people, you are blinded to the sin in your own heart. And I'm just telling you guys, the longer you've been in church, the greater our propensity is to be like those religious people. And we have always got to watch and say, am I becoming like the Pharisees? Am I just filled with self-righteousness? You see? So what happens? What's Jesus going to do? The law says execute her, but Jesus is full of grace. What is he going to do? Is Jesus just going to say, hey, you know what? Your sin isn't a big deal. Not a big deal. Don't worry about it. What's he going to do? That's the big question. When Jesus raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, woman, and just so you guys know, it doesn't sound that polite, but in the first century AD, this was a very polite way to address a woman. It was a very respectful way. It'd be like saying, dear lady, maybe in the South, ma'am. It's a respectful time. So, ma'am, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She said, no one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, now look at this. Look. Neither do I condemn you. Let that sink in a little bit. Neither do I condemn you. Why does Jesus say that? Why doesn't he say, now if I were Jesus, guess what my propensity would be? You're an idiot. What are you doing? You knew better. You just ruined your marriage. You were raised better than this. What were you thinking? You know how it is. But thank God Jesus is not like me. And thank God Jesus isn't like you, right? So he says to her, go and sin no more. So, what is the point here? Those people that have come to shame Jesus have to exit in shame. He calls them out on their sexual sin, and from the oldest to the youngest, they got to run away. He's left with the woman, and he says, listen, I'm not going to condemn you. The Bible tells us Jesus came into the world not to condemn the world, but to save the world. How could Jesus do this? And then he tells her, go and sin no more. Jesus is making a point here. And he's saying, you know what? I wrote the law. I have the right to forgive sin. Forgiving sin is who I am. It's my nature. It's my character. That the law, yes, it was punitive. It was to punish. But it was to drive humanity to see that they needed a Savior. And Jesus is saying, the reason I've come, because this is probably maybe at the beginning of the Passion Week. So in a week, in less than a week possibly, Jesus dies on the cross. And Jesus is trying to say there's a new era now. I'm here. God is in the flesh. And God has come to forgive sin because I am the substitute for you. And Jesus is basically saying, listen, I'm not going to condemn you because I'm taking your sin on me. Personally. I will pay the price for your adultery. I'm here to take your condemnation. I'm going to be condemned in your place. And it just says to her, hey, you know what? You need to change the way you're living. Go and sin no more. Folks, this is where you see the beauty of Jesus. Why do we worship Jesus? Why do we need to give our lives to Him? Because He's God, and this is His attitude toward sinners. And you know what? If you're a sinner, this is the God you want to serve. The Bible is going to tell us in Romans, it is the kindness of the Lord that draws us to repentance. Right? Now, do you think she's changed? I think so. It says here, then Jesus spoke to them, again saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. Now, what you got to see here is, here's the temple. This area here is the court of the women. Okay, that's where Jesus is teaching. This is the gate here. Okay, called the Beautiful Gate. This is east. This whole thing took place at dawn, so you can imagine the sun is coming in that gate. As this woman is walking out, she's facing the sun. She's walking into the light. It's this beautiful, powerful picture where Jesus says, listen, I am the light of the world. Meaning, if you don't have me, you're going to walk in darkness. You're going to be committing adultery. You're going to be shooting yourself in the foot. You're going to be doing stupid things. Now, what does it mean to walk in darkness? Okay, picture it like this. It's the middle of the night. You got to get up and use the bathroom. You got to walk down the hallway. The night before, your kids been playing with Legos, but you don't know that. The Legos are on the oak floor, and you're walking in the darkness, finding your way to the bathroom, and you step on a Lego. Anyone ever done that? That's what it means to walk in darkness. Jesus says, listen, you're going to do all kinds of self-destructive things. You're going to do things that hurt you, things that hurt others. But if you're walking towards me, I will illumine your life. See, if Jesus is this way, and you're walking that way, guess what? You're walking in your own shadow. You're going to stub your toe, step on Legos. Who knows what you're going to do to yourself and to those people around you. But Jesus is saying, listen, you need to take an about face and recognize I am the light. If you follow me, come to me, you're no longer going to walk in darkness. So the thing about darkness is this, guys, is how many of you have ever done something you knew was stupid, it was wrong, and it was not going to be good for you to do it, but you went ahead and did it anyway? Has anyone ever done something? Kind of like human condition, isn't it? How many have done that more than once? Yeah. It is central to the human experience. We all do things we know are stupid, harmful, and dumb, yet we continue to do it. Why? Because we're walking in darkness. We need Jesus to shine the light so we can see. Because somehow, in our brain, we think, hey, I'm going to go do this again. And, the last 600 times I've done it, it's always ended poorly. But maybe this time it's going to be different. That's walking in darkness. And Jesus is saying, listen, you got to understand, you need light. You see, the religious people, they want to curse the darkness. Jesus is saying, not just light a candle, I am the light. And when you come to me, you're not walking in your own shadow. And that is going to be the light of life. In other words, we're going to talk more about it next week. That is what gives you the ability to choose life over death. Every one of our decisions we make, we looked at it last week. You're either choosing life or you're choosing death. Every time we sin, we bring death to our mind, will, and emotions. It's a soul death, the Bible teaches. Every time we choose the right thing, we choose life. But you can't have life without the illumination of the person of Jesus. And what is the person of Jesus? It's grace. It's embodied in love. And when you experience the grace of God found in Jesus Christ, it will change your soul. Now, I want to just show a clip here. Anthony's going to cue this up for me. And maybe, Ed, you could assist him back there. This is from the movie Les Mis. If you remember the story of Les Mis, this guy's been put in prison. John has been put in prison for, I think, 19 years for stealing bread to feed his family. He's finally let out. This bishop lets him spend the night. The poor bishop's wife is scared to death because they're letting a criminal, someone from prison, in their home spend the night. And the bishop makes a decision to show this man grace. And what does the man do? In the middle of the night, he gets up and he steals the bishop's silverware. Okay, so go ahead. And remember, let's turn. We're going to have to turn this guy up.
Anybody